there's one who's worthy to open the scroll.
So can you start over for the video?
Yes, sir.
Please.
Yes, sir. Okay.
You're fired.
Okay.
That breaks your heart, doesn't it?
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Okay, so what we said is in Revelation chapter 5, we see that Jesus opened this, it was the only one worthy to take the scroll. And that there's 7 seals on that scroll. And we have been in the middle of, and we're going to do a little bit of a review before we go on, of him opening those seals. So what is the purpose of the scroll? What is the purpose of the scroll and Jesus opening those seals?
Starts the beginning of the rapture.
Okay, and it's actually
The beginning of the
before.
end.
Yeah. Okay. So you're exactly right. So that starts the beginning of the end. Okay. What else? What else? Why is Jesus taking the scroll?
He's going to pronounce the judgments.
Okay, there are definitely going to be judgments. And that plays into the process of the end. Okay, what else?
Fulfills the prophecy.
Does fulfill prophecy. What else?
I think it means the events are about to happen.
Yeah, and that the fulfillment of prophecy. Yes. And then, so the events that are going to happen on earth are triggered in heaven. Okay, and there's one critical thing that we haven't mentioned yet. All of these things are true. What is he taking that scroll compared to a will? And he is opening each one of those seals because that is going to do something. What is that?
Triggers an event to take place.
It does trigger an event to take place. That's true.
Well, ultimately, he's going to be given the world,
There you go.
and so it's like a land deed.
Yep, it is a land deed, and it is him taking back ownership of the world that he purchased on the cross. Okay. In chapter 6, we saw 6 of the 7 seals opened. Let's see what we remember about those 7 seals, and feel free to look. You don't have to. So we saw 6 of the 7 seals open, and what do we remember happened? And we're gonna, a couple of weeks from now, as best as I can, we're gonna work on a timeline with these things. Okay? I'm not ready yet. So the first seal.
White horse.
Yep. White horse. Remember any details about the white horse?
Bow, no arrows.
No bow, and that, so it's a rider
Yeah, rider, the rider.
on the white horse. Okay. No arrows with the bow, and
False peace.
but he still is going to conquer. He's supposed to conquer. Okay, we spent a lot of time, and we will, as we go further in, a few chapters away from here, we're going to be looking at this character more. And based on what we'd spent time in Daniel and cross-referencing to other places, who's the rider on the white horse?
The Antichrist.
The Antichrist. Okay. What about who's?
I'm just saying, there's actually, I mean, if you think about it, there's 5 riders. The 4 are the ones that Christ released with the opening of the seals, and then it says that Christ will come back on a horse, right?
Yes, in Revelation 19.
So the white horse is what Christ rides on.
He does.
So he's riding a white horse as representation of a Christ as the Antichrist.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. Okay, it's a fake.
A fake
a substitute.
Substitute, yeah.
Anti is against or instead of,
Yep.
and that's what that word anti means, so, okay. What about the second rider? Do you remember anything about the second rider? And you may look.
Red horse.
Red horse.
Red horse, and what do we find out about the rider on the red horse? What does he bring?
War. Yeah, war.
Okay, what about the rider on the third horse?
Black.
Black, and what did the black horse rider bring?
Scales.
Yeah, and because, what were the scales showing? Famine.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last rider, and each one of these riders are a seal. Okay, and what was the last rider?
Pale. Green, whatever.
Pale green horse, which brought what?
Yes.
And what kind of death?
Plague, disease.
And how much?
One.
Yep.
Quarter of the.
Yeah,
or
25% of the population, which today's population would be 2 billion.
A lot of dead bodies.
People. Yes, it is. Okay, so then the fifth seal showed us what?
Saints that have died before were slain.
Yep, so the fifth seal was martyrs. And then the sixth seal had multiple events that were part of the sixth seal. What were the multiple events that were part of the sixth seal?
Earthquake.
Earthquake. And what kind of earthquake?
A great.
Okay, and so great that it actually changed the Google Maps. Okay, what else did we see? The earthquake, what else did we see? What other event?
Stars.
Yep.
Stars falling.
Yeah, and he compared, so the heavens were shaking, and he compared the stars falling to what?
Fig tree.
Yeah, it's like if somebody shook a fig tree and the figs were dropping, he compared the stars falling to that kind of an event. Okay, anything else?
The stars fall and the sky split.
Okay, the sky split open. And it would give somebody a sense of what? If you see the sky splitting open, and there is a possibility, because they knew this was God, there's a possibility that, like Stephen, they were actually able to see God on his throne in heaven. Because they made that comment, that God was on his throne. We don't know that for sure, but it's a potential possibility. They knew that this was God. The other things, they may not. They may have gone, man, we are in a bad world right now. But this they knew was God. Okay, anything else? But certainly give you a sense of all of this stuff. What would the sense be? How did people respond?
They were hiding.
They were hiding in caves.
Rock, under rock.
Rocks,
Yes.
And wanting the mountains to fall on them.
Yes, great fear. Great fear. And if you've been, has anybody been through an earthquake? I mean, we've had them here. Yes.
We grew up in the building there a little
one?
bit more drastic.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a little unsettling to have, the earth doing this. Okay. All right, so that's our basic review of 5, 6, and 7. What happened in 7, what we want to know is, so when we go to chapter 8, which is where we're headed, that's going to pick up with the 7th seal. So these 6 seals are boom, boom, boom after each other. And again, we're going to get it on as close as we can a timeline soon. But there's chapter 7 is kind of like, I need to tell you some more information. I need to tell you something that I want to stop right here and tell you. And it's not necessarily like these things are going to be in order, these 6, and then 7 is coming. So it's like a paragraph in there, or
I may have asked this before, but it's not, when these seals are open, I guess it's not like this stage is done, this stage is done, this stage is done. It's like
the
this is
impact.
still there, and then
Yes.
this is added, and then
That's
this
the
is
way to
added.
think
and then-
about it.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely the way to think about it. And how we only know what God chooses to tell us. He doesn't tell us everything. So, okay.
Think of it as a summary, and then he goes back and he fills in some of the details.
Yeah, and that's really a good way to put it, Brian. So one of the details he wants us to know about is chapter 7. And in chapter 7, he tells us about two groups of people. What are those two groups of people that he tells us about?
Well, first of all, he marks the 144,000 Jews.
Yep.
The angels.
There's an angel.
The white rovers.
So they mark 144,000, and those are Jews who are converted. And what did we find out? We compared that to chapter 14, which also discussed those 144,000. And where were those 144,000? You're doing pretty good.
In the front.
Like in the front
Where were those 144,000?
in Israel.
Yeah, they meet Jesus when he comes back, and there's still what? How many of them? 144,000. So they were sealed, they were protected for this purpose during all of these horrible events that we're going to see being poured out. Okay, so we go from earth where we have these Jews who are giving the gospel to the second half of that chapter goes back to heaven. And who do we see in heaven?
144,000.
There on earth,
See the martyrs.
we see the martyrs. And how were that group of martyrs described?
Under the altar?
They're under the altar.
The multitude. The great multitude.
Yeah. They were a great multitude. And then we could compare some of these things to what Jesus said in Matthew 24. And in Matthew 24:14, I would like somebody to read Matthew 24:14 because that fits with this great multitude of people, and these Jewish Christians are communicating through the most horrible events on earth. What does Matthew 24:14 say?
And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world for a witness to all the nations, and then to the end shall come.
Okay, so this is the plan of God. And again, it's such a crazy thing to think about, is that the earth is under what? During these 7 years, what is the earth under? Destruction
God's
and
wrath.
yeah, God's wrath, destruction. And look what he does in the face of that is he provides people mercy and grace against his outpouring of wrath and judgment. It really shows us how much God loves people. How about Joel 2:10 through 14? What does Joel 2:10 through 14 say?
The earth quakes before them, the heavens tremble. The sun and the moon are darkened, and the stars withdraw their shining. The Lord utters his voice before his army, for his camp is exceedingly great. He who executes his word is powerful. For the day of the Lord is great and very awesome. Who can endure it? Yet even now, declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning, and rend your hearts and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for his gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love, and he relents over disaster.
So that's absolutely a great description of what is happening during the day of the Lord. Yes, the judgment is there. Yes, this horrible outpouring is there. But here's God saying, return to me. And what if people return to him, what will they find?
Mercy, grace, peace,
Yes.
everything that God represents.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, let's go to chapter 8, verse 1. And let's read that verse.
When he opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour.
Okay. So what happens in verse 1?
He opens the seal and there's silence in heaven.
And there's silence in heaven. Now think back, because we've looked at multiple chapters, chapter 4, chapter 5, the second half of chapter 7, and we've seen heaven. And how would you describe heaven as far as noise?
Constant praise and rejoicing and singing. So silence would be unusual.
It would be very unusual from everything that we've been shown. It would be very unusual. And then there were people crying out to God in prayers. And we talked about that a couple of weeks ago. Why do you think there's silence?
I don't know. If you look back in Genesis, there was rest on the seventh day. He rested. God rested.
Interesting.
And so maybe that has something.
Okay.
Maybe some
Seventh
kind of high, I
seal,
don't know.
seventh day. I don't know. That's an interesting thought, and that never occurred to me. So I think that's interesting. Is he giving you grief?
No, I'm just saying, I asked you a genuine question. I said, did you get that from your morning Bible study?
Yes.
Because she's been doing a lot of real
Okay,
revelation
cool.
stuff too.
That's cool. Well, I've never heard that. I think that's really cool. Thank you.
Or it's just, yeah, or it's that.
Well, there's just a lot of, it goes back to creation in this. Like, he undoes it the same way he does it. You know, he undoes
Yes.
his,
It's the end of creation.
Genesis, he
of that
stretches it out
creation.
here, he just finished rolling
Yes.
it up.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a really good point. I really appreciate
And I
that.
don't know if that even answered,
Well,
like,
I
that was
think.
even the question you answered.
Well, no, it could be a contributing factor. So we've talked about that there's a lot of communication going on in heaven, and then there's 30 minutes of silence.
It's the last seal too,
It's the last seal.
and anticipation. Yeah.
I mean, they know that there's seven
For
seals.
what's about to happen.
Yeah, and so they kind of get a sense of this is a big deal. And so where there's been all this other, not that the other ones weren't, but this one is a big deal. It's also, I'm not going to say that yet. Okay, so that's part of it for sure. And there's an awareness of vengeance being poured out on earth. So there is some kind of, again, God doesn't tell us, some kind of connection between heaven and earth and what kind of an awareness that they may or may not have. Yes.
Well, it's complete. So like the seventh day, God rested because his creation was complete. The seventh seal, it's gonna be complete.
That is really true because, and we'll see this as we go, so the seventh seal is gonna actually open up 7 trumpets. That's part of the seventh seal. So you're exactly right. When the 7th judgment, there's the 7 trumpets, and then the last trumpet is gonna open 7 bowls. And they're all part of that 7th seal. So consequently, when the 7th seal is done, it's done.
Time's up.
Yes, time
is up.
it's over. Then we see Jesus come back. But yeah, thank you for pointing it out that way.
If you Google it, it says it's a moment of reverence and anticipation before the unfolding of God's judgments.
So there's some sense of what they're seeing, experiencing, and as we go on, we'll get to see more of what they see, okay?
And I think that reverence still ties back to the Sabbath.
Yes.
And I think there's a realization, as you said, that since the Garden of Eden, people have suffered in this world. And people have cried out, how long, how long, how long? When are you gonna own this world and it's gonna look like you instead of what is so wrong here?
Now you know where we got the Lord's Prayer, because that's what we're asking for.
Yeah.
We're asking
good
for
job.
revelation. We're
Yep.
asking for the seals to be broken.
Yep.
So, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's the only way it can be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Yep.
Is by the rapture and the revelation to come.
Yep. And him taking back ownership.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So what do you think John thought? This is just kind of we don't know emphatically, but what do you think John thought as he watched this, as he, why does it say 30 minutes of silence?
It's probably still writing it all down.
He probably was, but he probably was kind of anticipating what's coming because he doesn't know. He's going to watch it unfold like we're going to watch it unfold as we read. We've answered that question in the sense of what's happening in heaven. There's some sense of what's going on earth. And how much, we don't know. But we remember a couple of weeks ago when we talked about their prayers and saying how long before you basically restore yourself as owner of the earth. And they talked about the people on the earth that martyred them.
So those prayers stop.
Well, we're going to see that here in just a second, actually. Okay, let's read verse 2, chapter 8.
And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets.
Okay, so how much time do we think has passed?
30 minutes.
Yeah. And so that 30-minute time frame of silence has passed, and now all of a sudden he sees what?
7 trumpets.
7 angels
7 angels.
before God.
Okay. What does Luke 1:19 tell us? Well, how many angels' names do we know? 2 for sure, which are?
Michael, Gabriel.
Okay. Who else?
Um,
There's 3.
Ezra? No,
The devil.
the devil.
Lucifer. Okay, so we're going to get into that next week. But what
There's
is?
a cherub.
Huh?
There's a cherub.
Well.
I mean,
Let's look at Luke 1:19.
And the angel answered and said to him, I am Gabriel, who stands in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news.
Who's he talking to there?
Zacharias.
Yeah, John the Baptist's dad. That's who, and he's a priest, and we're going to see him, something come up with him here in just a second too. But how does he describe himself?
Messenger of the Lord.
He stands in the presence of God.
Okay, so go back to Revelation chapter 8, verse 2, and what do we see?
Stand before God.
Yeah, 7 angels who stand in the presence before God. Gabriel very well could have been, we don't know, but it's interesting that he gives that description of himself to Zacharias. He very well could be one of these 7 angels that are going to blow these trumpets.
Could he be the next one that comes holding the censer?
We don't know. We don't know, but they described themselves as standing in the presence of God. Gabriel described himself in that same way. Okay? All right, so we've already said that the relationship between the 7 trumpets and the 7 seals is what? The 7th seal is what? Yeah, opening the 7 seals starts the 7 trumpets. That is, so when we say there's 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 bowls of wrath, there's really 19 events because the 7th one starts the next series.
Wasn't there 7 trumpets they used when they marched around Jericho?
They used trumpets, but I can't tell you what the number was.
Well, only went around it 7 times, I guess, blowing trumpets.
Yes, they did do that. Okay. Let's read verses 3 and 4. So we got the 7 angels standing there, and now he's going to describe what he sees next in verses 3 and 4.
Another angel who had a golden censer came and stood at the altar. He was given much license to offer with the prayers of all of God's people on the golden altar in front of the throne. The smoke of the incense, together with the prayers of God's people, went up before God from the angel's hand. Do I keep going?
No. Okay, no. Okay, so what takes place as the 7 angels are prepared to blow their trumpets?
Another angel had a golden censer.
Yep, another angel is there, and he has a golden censer, and there are 2 things in that golden censer. Prayers
And incense.
and incense. And often these are related. Why?
Because prayer is a pleasing aroma to God.
There you go. Prayers of pleasing aroma to God. And so that it's not, this is a message God is giving us about prayer. Okay?
So this is an offering to God at this point, right?
Yeah, and we're gonna see that here in just one second, but that's what it is. Okay? And so let's look at Luke 1, 8 through 10. And this is going back to Zacharias, and he's a priest, okay? And we're going to see him doing something. And then we're going to come back and look at the description again in Revelation 8:4. So what do we see about Zacharias in Luke 1, 8 through 10?
Once when Zechariah's division was on duty and he was serving as priest before God, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And when the time for the burning of incense came, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside.
Okay, so where is he? Where is Zacharias? Where is he?
He was the high priest, so he was at the temple of Jerusalem.
Yeah, he's in the temple, and he's not in the Holy of Holies, because you go in the Holy of Holies how often?
Legend once a year.
Once a year. That's all. So there's an altar outside the Holy of Holies. That's where he is, and what is he doing?
Burning incense.
Burning incense. And then outside of the temple, what are the people doing? What are the people doing?
Praying.
Praying. And what does it say about their prayers?
It was at the hour of the incense burning.
Okay. And so here on earth, when the temple existed, we see the priest conducting the very thing we see the angel doing in heaven. And the description of the altar, if we would read through the book of Hebrews, we would find out that the temple on earth is a picture of heaven. And so this same altar that we see this angel doing this is the same altar, earthly picture of a heavenly place. Okay? Let's see what verses 3 and 4, would you read that again?
Revelation.
Yes.
Which one?
8, 3 and 4 again. I want to get some of the details that will match with Zechariah.
And another angel came and stood at the altar holding the golden censer, and much incense was given him, that he might add it to the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints went up before God out of the angel's hand.
Okay. And that's exactly what Zacharias was doing and the people were doing around the temple on the earth when we were reading that event. Okay?
So let me ask you, this is way off, but so.
Does it
They're
have to
doing-
do
they're
with
doing
the
the-
washing machine?
No, it has nothing to do with the parrot or washing machine.
Okay, then you can ask.
But now I've lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Now I want to talk about parrots.
No, I'm sorry.
No, but the altar and the ceremony that they're going through, is that the same because angels walked with men on earth and taught them that? Or, because you said it's exactly the same kind of, I don't know if the ritual's the right word, but process.
If we would, and I can pull out some verses in Hebrews, which I didn't do for tonight, but when we go back and we see that Moses was told exactly how to design the temple.
Okay.
And it has to do, that was part of God wanting, that temple on earth is a picture of what's in heaven.
He was basically given instructions.
He was
on
told,
this is the
oh,
way
everything, the finest detail on how it had to be.
and the
Everything.
priests- Yeah, the priests were carrying that out
Yes,
later.
yes. And even with their feasts, which Moses got that information, all of those feasts are fulfilled, are pictures of Jesus. And so all these details, it's not an accident. There is intention behind those details. They mean something. Okay, so let's read verse 5. We know this silence is over. Here comes verse 5. What do we see?
Then the angel took the censer, filled it with fire from the altar, and hurled it on the earth. And there came peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake.
Okay, so what is in the censer?
Filled it with fire.
Yeah, he added fire to the incense. And what was the result on earth?
It was,
There was thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake.
Okay.
Makes you wonder, what were these prayers offered up? Were they prayer for vengeance?
Well, that's what we have to go back to.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's saying the prayers, the incense, all of that is combined in here. Let's go back and let's read two places. And this adds to what you brought up, Joe, a few weeks ago. And I wasn't far enough ahead to be able to add this to it, okay?
A few weeks ago? You're gonna have to remind me what it was. Yeah.
Okay,
Why were they
the prayers and why do they care?
Oh, okay.
Okay, so let's read Revelation 5:8.
now, now when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each having a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints.
Okay, in that sense of these are accumulated prayers over time that are going into this bowl. Okay, then look at chapter 6, verses 9 through 11. Let's read those verses.
When he opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who have been slain because of the word of God and the testimony they have maintained. They called out in a loud voice, "How long, sovereign Lord, holy and true, until you judge the inhabitants of the earth and avenge our blood?" Then each of them was given a white robe, and they were told to wait a little longer until a full number of fellow servants, their brothers and sisters, were killed just as they had been.
Okay, and we saw some of those in chapter 7, part of those martyrs. Okay, but here he tells them, they ask how long, and what is their prayer for how long? What are they driving at? Is it just vengeance?
It was justice.
It is, yes, some of it's justice. Is that all?
For the Lord to come and
I
take
think
his
they
place.
just are ready for the Lord to.
Absolutely. They're ready, like people have been ready through the harshest of circumstances for all time. They're ready for God to own the world again. And for it to look like God. And for people to act like God. And to be like God. That's what and yes, they suffered a martyr's death because of evil. And because of the enemy. And so this is what, and so when we see the angel in verse 5, throwing that censer to the earth, what does that show us about those prayers?
That they're part of the judgment. They're part of the vengeance.
Yes.
They're stored for that day by God.
Yeah. So what they're praying for, and he said, be patient, is this event. And those prayers are that censer is being thrown to the earth. And it's one more step God is taking for Jesus to own the world again. Okay? How about let's read, I don't have 6 in here, but we should probably read it. Let's read 6 and 7. Do I have it in here? Am I lying? No, I don't.
And the 7 angels who had the 7 trumpets prepared to sound them, the first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down on the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up.
Okay, so I skipped something by accident. So I have 7 there, 8-7, but I really wanted it to be 8-6. And so that's my error. So what do we see in 8-6 happening?
Prepared to blow their trumpet.
Yeah, they're ready. They're prepared to blow their trumpets. Then let's go back and let's look at, and we talked about this a minute ago, but let's just go back and read what has been transpiring. We had a pause in there. We talked about the gospel being preached. We talked about people being converted, great multitudes, but there's no pause in these events taking place. So people on earth just experienced what the 6th trumpet was. We don't know how much time passed. We know at least a half hour. But no, we don't know how much time passed between the blowing of that trumpet and then the blowing of this, that seal being opened. I said it wrong. And these trumpets being blown. We don't know how much time has passed. But we do know what they experienced just before this.
Maybe I misunderstood it, but there's at least 30 minutes because open the seal, silence, and then the trumpets, right?
Right, yes, but I asked that in a terrible question, so
Right.
let's start.
It's the earthquake and everything.
Yes,
The
all
sky
that.
rolling back.
Yes, all of those events, and they're hiding in the caves, and maybe there was just a little bit of calm, that they are coming back out. We don't know, but there's possibility of that, and now the 7th seal is opened. The first trumpeter, angel, blows the trumpet, and what happens on earth?
What is that 30 minutes? I mean, does that mean 30 actual minutes, or does that mean 1,000 years is a day? Then that would be
It's a good
21 years
question.
technically.
It's a good question, and I think that God told John purposefully to say 30 minutes.
So that would
And
assume 30
John was
minutes
still
our time.
functioning on the earth. And so, because he recorded it as 30 minutes as a person who was living on earth, it seems that that's really what God intended.
But it made me wonder, because it says, he was in the spirit, so maybe
Right.
that truly means it was.
And we can't be emphatic. We really can't be emphatic. We don't know exactly.
Yeah, this is all symbolic here, but if you think about the people in the caves, if they really did see God, and he opens the heaven, and he's looking at them, and it's complete silence.
And we don't know what happened on earth. We do know there was silence in heaven. We don't know if that was that deathly silence that we can experience sometimes when you know something's coming and there's that almost
Calm before the
calm
storm.
before the storm. Yeah, we don't know because he doesn't talk about that in relationship to what's going on there.
You can see the people though, like, hiding in the caves and behind the rocks and stuff, and the earthquakes and everything that's happened. And then if there was 30 minutes of complete silence, they'd be like, it's over.
Yeah, and they may.
They
Yeah.
start venturing out, and then
Yes.
this trumpet.
Yes, and that may very well be how it's transpiring on the earth. We only know what God tells us, and we can put as many pieces together as possible, but we're not going to be able to put all the pieces together. So when the first angel blows his trumpet, what is the impact on earth?
A third of the earth burns.
A third of the earth burns. We have had wildfires in the news for a while. That one in Hawaii, the one in LA, the ones in the Carolinas, and you see pictures of those things, and what's the picture?
Desolation. It's all destroyed. There's nothing left except for rubble.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's only small snippets. And he's saying here that when that censer is thrown down to earth, 1/3 of the earth is going to be burned up. What else?
Maybe the trees and the grass.
third
All
of
the
the trees
grass.
and all the.
All the grass, yeah.
All the grass.
A third of the trees, all the grass. And what is this gonna do?
Scorched earth.
Get rid of a lot of oxygen.
It is. It is. And what else is it gonna get rid of?
Food.
Food,
Food for not just us, but food for animals that,
right?
cows,
Right.
Eat
So
grass,
there,
right.
what's gonna be the result?
more death.
More death. Okay. All right. So let's look at the second trumpet and let's read 8 and 9.
The earthquake that it's talking about in verse 5, is
Yep.
that additional earthquake to the one that they talk about after the sixth seal?
Because it says in the part of this, we're seeing multiple earthquakes.
Yeah.
That are,
Remember, it's like birth pains, it's just
and yeah, it is.
disaster
And
after disaster.
you're exactly right. Okay. So
And
what's
before we move on to that second trumpet.
Yep.
What is the significance of the blood?
good question? We don't know.
Oh.
It's anything that we would suggest could be the death that
Yeah.
occurs. Is it literal blood that God mixes?
Return of
So
blood of
maybe
the
it's like,
martyrs.
maybe it's like his,
Oh, that's an
Yeah.
What
interesting
did you
thought.
say?
Well, the
Very
martyrs have been asking him to avenge their blood.
That's a
I didn't-
very interesting thought.
I didn't hear what you said.
The martyrs have been,
Oh,
you know,
okay.
like the ones that have been asking him to, like,
Okay.
when are you going to avenge our blood? We just poured that blood back out over there.
That's a very interesting thought. I did not read that, but that's a very interesting thought.
So the prayers that are in the bowls, or in this, that were added to this scepter thing, those are only the people who live through the tribulation's prayers. That's not the
No,
prayers of all
not-
the saints ahead of that,
Oh,
that
Lord.
have already been in heaven a while.
I don't know that we can be exclusive, but because of what we saw in chapter 5, and we saw the 24 elders with those same, with
Bowls.
with bowls with prayers in it, and we looked at those 24 elders as being representatives of the church, it certainly makes us want to look past just this time period, the martyrs, but for believers for all time, that God is. And he says in the Psalms, and I don't know how he stores the tears in a bottle. So anyway, I don't know. I don't know.
There's something in the Greek that sticks out. It's, the word for blood is haima, and it means bloodshed by violence or murder.
Okay, but it's a really interesting
Yes.
thought that you had there, Nate, because it could very well be that's the significance of it. I did not have anybody read that, or I didn't read that anywhere, but it's a very interesting thought, especially because it's connected to their prayers and what their prayers were. Okay, so the second trumpet, let's read, we didn't read that yet, right? No, we did not.
then the second angel sounded, and something like a great mountain burning with fire was thrown into the sea, and a third of the sea became blood, and a third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed.
Okay, so what does that sound like when it talks about a great mountain? Some kind of a volcano potentially, asteroid potentially, a comet potentially. That something in that vein is, and it talked about a fiery tail, right?
Burning with fire.
Burning with fire, okay. So any of those things, we're in the ballpark to think about it that way. And where does that land?
In the ocean.
In the sea, okay.
Well, there's actually, it has something similar has happened before off of like the Yucatan Peninsula. There's a big asteroid strike that's
Right, really?
like 100 times larger than the one in Arizona.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it hit the ocean right on the point, right where the point of Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula,
Okay,
and it's huge.
okay,
So,
I didn't know that.
yeah.
Okay, so if you take that into consideration, he says it's going in the sea, what's gonna be the result of this going into the sea?
Tsunamis.
Yeah, there will be, so how do you know the tsunami is being talked about? what in there?
Destroys a bunch of ships.
Yep, a third of the ships, and that would make you think of a tsunami.
TSU.
SU.
All
Okay.
of these events change the weather. I mean,
Yes, they do.
just like the fire thing,
Yep,
fire makes its own weather.
yes, it does.
So there's terrible things on both
Each one,
sides.
yes, thank you for bringing that
Yeah,
up.
I don't know if y'all remember Mount Pinatubo when it erupted for like 6 months or whatever it was. It changed the weather for that time, and that was just a small volcano.
Okay, so those are the right ideas for us to think beyond just how those events are being described, to go, what's the impact on the earth? And all of these things are true. They're gonna change, and what's, our first 1/3 was what?
The sea became blood.
Okay, and what would make you think that, what would that,
It's all
The
the,
plague.
all the death in it probably.
yeah, cause what happens as a result of
A
this?
third of the
Third of
living
the world.
creatures.
Third of everything dies.
Creatures.
Sea creatures, yep. And so that would definitely, that one's more, you could see the connection there. So you see a third of the sea creatures die, a third of the ships, tsunami. What else is gonna happen with ships and with tsunamis and this kind of, and it reminded me of when you said like when they'll drop on the earth and they kind of,
They
It's like you
destroyed-
throw, it's the same thing as when you throw a rock into a pond,
uh-huh,
except for it ripples out.
uh-huh,
But imagine like the moon being thrown into the
Yeah,
ocean.
yeah.
What that would cause.
right,
So it would be like, it would shoot stuff out to the atmosphere, out to the space, so it would hit so hard.
right,
So
Okay.
when the weather changes, yeah, if something like a mountain slammed into the ocean, it would send stuff into the outer atmosphere and cover dust over the entire earth and it block the sun out.
which, again, we will see that described more as we continue to go on. Okay, so this is the second angel blowing the trumpet. What about the third angel? And this would be like ports and, all of that would be wiped out. So we're talking again, what's the target of these angels' trumpets, these judgments? What's the target
Devastation,
of
everything that's living.
the earth itself? Yeah, these are all directed at the earth. And why did God make the earth?
And plus, just another thought, with all these things dying in the sea, all those things rot in the sea, and that'll cause algal blooms too, and it'll take all the oxygen out once those start dying. So it's like a chain reaction. Like a third of the things die,
The ecosystem
the
is
ecosystem
dramatically
is
changed. Yeah.
dramatically changed,
Yeah,
Yeah,
and all that stuff's released, and then things bloom, and then those die, and it just compounds on itself.
okay. Yeah, that's the right picture.
in Hebrew, they also use the word blood, to talk about red algae.
Mm.
That you see like in the little lakes when they turn red,
Okay,
so they use the same word there, so.
okay. Okay, so let's look at the third trumpets. And I can't help but think about, not that we should destroy the earth, but people think that they could do things to save the earth. And it's kind of like, this is just flying in the face of that, because God made the earth to sustain life. And now, as you talked about a minute ago, it's almost like the opposite to get to the final event. And that's what's happening here. And he's attacking every element of what can sustain life.
It's crazy to me because he created it all and now he's destroying it all.
And he's doing it in the same kind of order, like
That's an interesting thought too. Okay, and then along with that, yes, he created it all, but it makes more sense that there's gonna be a new heaven and a new earth. It makes a lot of sense. Not that he couldn't make it all okay, I'm not saying that, but,
It's happened before, like things of that magnitude have happened on the earth before too, before humans were there. We're here. So like a big asteroid is hit the earth.
potentially.
Well, I mean, it has, because it's called the KC boundary, and it's caused by a large asteroid striking the earth, and there's a millimeter boundary on every continent that has the exact same chemical structure from that strike.
what I would like to put out, one, why I said potentially, is the fact that when Noah's flood
Yeah.
occurred, that's when those events took place, and that people did exist prior to it, but that it was in association with Noah's flood.
That would have a different signature.
I'm not a geologist. I confess that I am not a geologist. Okay, so
Yeah, but
look
there
at,
have been very large floods on Earth before that are recorded.
go to, the third angel.
The third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter.
Okay, so what happens when the third angel blows his trumpet?
A star fell, blazing like a torch, and then the third of the rivers and springs of water were, I guess.
And what did they associate
It
that
turned
star?
the water, it turned it bitter, it
Right.
says.
And then what did,
And then many people died from the waters.
okay, so it was a contamination of fresh water source. Okay, and then the star falling, they had a name for it.
Wormwood.
Yeah,
Wormwood, which means bitter water.
yeah.
Which
So
is
again-
which is a reference back to Numbers, where it talks about the bitter water that brings a curse.
And I don't know if any of you were listening last week to the news, but we had an eclipse and they called it a wormwood eclipse.
Interesting.
Blew my mind when I read that.
No, I didn't even hear that.
Yeah.
So then, yeah, if you have a star falling,
And I Googled the wormwood, and it said that they call it that because that's when the earthworms, it's spring, and the earthworms are starting to come up from out of the ground, and it means new life, which I don't know if there's any significance, but could be springtime, y'all, when this is happening.
Well, you never know. You don't know.
I mean,
Interesting.
I mean, it just blew my mind when I
Yeah,
heard
that
that.
is
I just heard that in the news.
and we have all these meteor showers. We have two big
I was
meteor
preaching
showers
to
every
him.
year. What is it, the Perseid and the Euclid, or Perseid and
Euclid.
the Euclid? So we see these stars all the time. And if any of that stuff, I mean, and when it hits, it makes a loud sound, so it's not out of the possibility that, I mean, what the Bible's saying is going to happen, but you can kind of see precursors of what will
Got
happen.
you. Yes, yeah, absolutely.
It's like you when a little bitty asteroid the size of a baseball
Yeah,
hits the Earth,
yeah.
it sounds like a nuclear bomb going off.
Wow, okay.
So,
So, and it also, this third angel, we don't know that this isn't, again, a result of the angel before, or the angel before blowing the trumpet. And then here comes another, like domino kind of thing is, being played out because of all the things that are happening on earth. And now we're gonna see in the fourth angel, what are we gonna see? Let's read 12 and 13.
The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark. A third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night.
Okay, so now we've shifted from the earth to
Side.
the heavens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
atmosphere.
Yeah.
so what is causing the third of the, is the sun dimming by a third? That would kill a lot of plants because they need a certain amount of light to live.
Right. I mean, again, it is, and it's also gonna change, it's gonna be colder,
Yes.
right?
Just like a volcano,
Temperatures.
a big comet hit the earth that put a lot of debris into there.
This has a lot of the same, like the plagues and
Exactly.
It's so
You
similar.
can, and I try to figure out how much of that, and there's another lesson in the future that we're gonna talk about that a little bit, but there are definitely parallels between the 10 plagues and Moses getting the nation of Israel out of Egypt and what he did, and there's definitely parallels, and so, and I didn't realize that before, but it's the right thing to trigger in our minds, is that's how God acted there. Okay, so the fourth, what do we see the fourth angel?
The sun was struck, a third of the sun moon.
Third of the sun, a third of the moon,
Third of the stars.
a third of the stars. And how does he describe what happens? We said it, but what does he say about the sun shining and it's dimmed by a third?
Over the day was without.
Yeah, so we watch an eclipse and are fascinated by an eclipse, but we're talking about an eclipse that's going to cover the sun for a third of the day. And as we said, that's going to affect the temperatures and just everything. And what about the moon? What does the moon impact on the earth?
The tides.
The tides. So we see, anyway, so this is the whole message that he wants us to have, and God is literally sending a plague to the sun, the moon, and the stars. And there's nowhere to get security, right?
You're on the earth.
There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to get to security. There's nowhere to hide. And you are on the earth, and you are living through these events. We're going to close with these I want to look at these verses that I have. So let's look at Isaiah 13, 9, and 10, describing this time period.
Behold, the day of the Lord comes, cruel with both wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he will destroy its sinners from it. For the stars of heaven and their constellations will not give their light. The sun will be darkened in its going forth, and the moon will not cause its light to shine.
Okay, that's what we just read about there in Revelation. How about Ezekiel? Let's read Ezekiel 32, 7 and 8.
And when I extinguish you, I will cover the heavens and darken their stars, and I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon shall not give its light. All the shining lights in the heavens I will darken over you, and will set darkness on your land, declares the Lord God.
Be kind of dark with it's not the same magnitude, but like the dust storms we've been having.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Those dim
Yeah.
things, it causes, like was it Abilene that had that big, Amarillo had the big car pile? Amarillo,
yeah.
you can't see.
Yeah, or have you been, I've been in a fire at one point where the smoke made the outside lights turn on, and, the street lights turn on in the middle of the day.
Right.
And for days because of the smoke from a fire. So that's just one small little event, and we're talking,
taste.
there's nowhere to, it's a taste of it. Okay, how about Joel 2:10 and Joel 2:31?
Before them, the earth shakes, the heavens tremble, the sun and moon are darkened, and the stars no longer shine. Verse 31, the sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord.
So for hundreds of years, so the minor prophets are about 400 years before the birth of Christ. Isaiah is about 700 years before the birth of Christ. I mean, God is continuing to tell people what's going to happen before it happens, and we see him telling again, this is still future in our time, spelling out what's going to happen, but it's consistent with what the prophets said in the Old Testament. And as we said, there's a lot of the 400 and some verses in Revelation, almost 300 of them relate to an Old Testament passage. Let's read Amos 8:9.
In that day, declares the sovereign Lord, I will make the sun go down at noon and darken the earth in the broad daylight.
Okay, and how about Mark, that's in the New Testament, Mark 13:24. What does Jesus say in Mark 13:24?
But in those days, following that distress, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and heavenly bodies will be shaken.
Okay, so we see that consistent message of this earth is gonna come under judgment. The earth itself, people are gonna come under judgment. And then go back to Revelation 8:13, and how does this chapter end?
As I watched, I heard an eagle that was flying in midair call out in a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth because of the trumpet blast about to be sounded by the other three angels.
So this was bad enough. But and how many woes are there?
3.
And how many trumpets left?
3.
Yeah, it's gonna get worse.
So the eagle's going, ha, you just thought that was bad.
Just about. But the intensity of what has happened.
And we pray for that to happen. Pray for God's will to be, justice to be done on earth. I mean, not that it's a bad thing, but I mean, it's a bad thing for people going through it. But for Jesus, for God's kingdom to be restored on earth, it has to.
For him to own the earth
It
again.
has to happen.
Yeah, it does have to happen. And again, the amazing grace of God is there are 144,000 Jews who are living through this with everybody else, and they have the only message of hope. And anyone that's converted because of them sharing the truth. Okay, we made it. One whole chapter. That's not happening next week.
Can you tell me how you got the 19 events again?
Sure,
I wasn't writing fast enough.
I'm sorry,
That's okay.
you're gonna have to learn to write
I
fast.
know.
Use both hands.
Okay, so you've got 7 trumpets.
Right?
Out of the 7th trumpet is 7,
Bowls.
well, let me go back. 7 seals.
7
Out of the
seals.
7th seal comes 7 trumpets. Out of the 7th trumpet comes 7 bowls.
Isn't that 21?
No, it's not, and the reason it's
Oh,
not is
okay.
because the 7th one, yes, smart aleck. Yes, the 7th one, it doesn't tell us anything that comes from that 7th one. It tells us what comes from it is the next series of 7. So,
So that's 20.
19.
Oh, you said 7.
So did
That's
it
just
twice.
one. Did it do it twice?
Yes, it's gonna do
Okay,
it twice.
Then that is.
Yeah,
So 21 minus
Although
2.
It just didn't make compute. I was getting 21 too, just so you know.
Thank you.
It's like one of those math problems on the internet.
I'm pretty lost, actually.
Please solve
but
for
if you see, and that's where we're going, but if you see, there was nothing, we saw, okay, he opened the 7th seal, what did we see? 7 angels, 7 trumpets. There was nothing that he said, that's what came out of the 7th seal, is those 7 angels blowing their trumpets. And that's what we're gonna see about the bowls of wrath or vials, you might see that. So it'll be the exact same way.
And you know, if you've witnessed all of this to this point, you're like seeing an eagle talk, that's not a big deal. I mean, it's not.
Hopefully you don't witness it because you're raptured. Or you're.
True, that is true. That's why you're good at telling stories.
That'd be a windy, right?
I can still hear John saying, slow down, I'm writing all this down.
Okay, let's close.
That's why he didn't ask me.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for communicating the truth to us. God, it's horrific to think about. And yet, you spare your children this judgment because Jesus took that judgment on the cross. And they in heaven have the greatest appreciation of salvation and what they've been spared of. Father, I just pray that we would have great appreciation too for what we've been spared of, no matter what is happening in our lives. And then along with these people that you chose to either be sealed or to be martyred, that it continues to remind us that you have a plan in all of our lives. It does include our trouble. That's hard for us. And we just pray that you would grow our faith each day to let you do what you as God wants to do in and through our circumstances. We need your help in that, but you tell us that you give us, you create faith and trust. And Father, help us to enjoy that fellowship with you in this life, no matter what is going on, and that you would foster that intimacy in all of our hearts. Thank you for the Bible. In Jesus' name I pray.